Bunny Irving. She is one of the sponsors of the Cavalcade of Authors. If you follow her on Facebook, they've been doing this 5-mile walk every morning. These divas are walking, and I live vicariously through them because I have a treadmill behind me that's probably still in the up position because it's been that kind of several months. I think I got on it maybe twice to, pay homage, and it was a good idea, but it was poor in execution. So I hats off to you guys in that 5-mile walk every day. And you are going to be brought on. Let me unmute you so you can do your interview with Earl Sewell. So, and I'm hoping, Earl, you have a little bit more time than some of the other authors because Bunny is hosting you, and there's not an author that comes 15 minutes after you. So I love when you do your reading of Lenny Gray. So if you're able to do that in addition to your chat, that would be awesome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. He's there. Can you hear us now?
Oh, I hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
You were still muted for some reason. So say that again.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, Earl. How you doing?
How's it going, Bonnie? It's good to see you.
Oh my God, it's good to see everybody. Y'all look so pretty and handsome. Oh my God.
Just because that pretty wouldn't work for him.
No, handsome. I would like to introduce to everyone or most Earl Sewell. How you doing? Tell us all about. My love is Lenny Gray. I am in love with him. Yeah.
Yeah, you like Lenny Gray?
Yes, I do. But I know you're an author, you're an auto book narrator. Okay. And a podcaster. Tell us a little bit about everything going on.
Okay, so you guys can hear me, right? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. So yeah, I'm Earl Sewell. I have written over 20 novels over the years. I've been in this game since the late 90s. I started off as a self-published author, then got picked up by traditional publishers and had a really, nice career with publishers like Harlequin and Kensington, BET, some work with Simon & Schuster as well. Then I actually, when, things started changing, I went back and reinvented myself. I went back to school and got a master's degree, and then I became a professor. So I teach writing as well for online universities and for local colleges around where I live here in the Chicago area. Then one thing that happened was as the shift happened in the publishing industry when we lost Borders Books and things like that, there was a major shift that started happening just like it happened in publishing. So I had to reinvent myself again. So I had some titles that started coming back to me. So I had never had an audiobook produced, and none of my publishers ever produced an audiobook for me. And it was one of those things where I was just waiting around for them to do that for me and, hoping that they would, but they never did. So I had a work of historical fiction that was rejected, that some publishers were interested, but then there was always that but in the middle of it. So I decided to self-publish the work again. And then this time I went back, got some training, invested in myself, got some equipment, and narrated my first audiobook, which was my own work. And I had a blast doing it. I had a really fun time doing it. But then I also noticed another trend that was happening. Although it's like, great, I have a book, I have an audiobook. I'm like, wonderful. But then I started noticing another trend in podcasting. And so what podcasting allowed me to do was to create a show. And so instead of my book and audiobook just being available in the United States, what I did is I repackaged that work and I turned it into a podcast, which runs like a show that you see on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon like that, where people can go and binge watch it. Like right now, I'm binge watching Lovecraft Country. Oh my God. But anyway, but it's audio. It's like this podcasting is like the golden age of audio, the second coming. So the awesome and fantastic thing about it is that I just don't get to be in every chocolate city in the United States. To my utter amazement and utter surprise, the podcast Lenny Gray that I turned into a show has been downloaded over 10,000 times in over 30 countries. So suddenly I went from just being an African American author in the US to being an internationally known writer in places like the UAE. Like, who listens to historical Black fiction in the United Arab Emirates? There's an audience for it. Or who listens to historical, Black fiction in Greece? There's an audience for it. It's amazing the reach that podcasting has given me. And so what that in turn did is I have what they call monetization of the podcast. So the next thing I know, I started getting advertising dollars. So AT&T will advertise on my podcast. McDonald's will advertise on my podcast. So I have all these other people coming in with the monetization advertising on the podcast. And so it is just like, wow. So now I have this, audience, that's global, that's following me. And I'm like, oh, I hate to tell them that the show is going to be ending, but that's okay, because I have, all of those books that I wrote, I can turn those into shows. So if you've ever thought about repackaging a piece of work that you've written and you've thought maybe audiobooks, but haven't thought podcasting, man, that's a way to go. And if you want to listen to the podcast, or it's free to listen to, it's great. You can listen to it on any podcast app, whether it's an Apple, Spotify, Android, on the internet. It's Lenny Gray. It's just called Lenny Gray Podcast. You can go into Google and type in LENNIE GRAY. It's a Southern name, two names, Lenny Gray. You can type it in there, and it's a fascinating story. It's a work of historical fiction. Starts in 1918 during the pandemic, ironically, and it follows a family for 30 years into the 1950s in the American South. So it's all about that, dealing with the pandemic, Jim Crow laws, and trying to move a family during the Great Migration North. So it's really about family dynamics, and how you can not only have society pressing you down, but people in your own family, in your own circle, can press you down. And of course, during this time, I touch on a lot of things with women's rights, because a lot of women didn't have rights, especially African American women didn't have a lot of rights, because they had to do what the man did, regardless. So, there's a lot of, back and forth with that. So I'll stop talking now. Oh, and then the last thing I'll say is, so when I got into the audiobook narration thing, the next thing I knew was an author from Canada reached out to me and asked me if I would narrate her book, which is a work of historical fiction. And she said, yeah, my book follows a man from the time he's 8 until he's in his late 70s. And he escapes from South Carolina, goes to Canada, and then only to get freedom, only to come back to fight in the Civil War. So I narrated her book. And then 3 more books came after that. Then the next thing I knew, I got an offer to narrate the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. Then I ended up narrating this book called Chasing Space, which was a memoir about a guy who played in the NFL for the Dallas Cowboys and the Detroit Lions, and then became an astronaut.
Right.
So I narrated his book. Then I narrated The Other Wes Moore, and that I did for a nonprofit. And now I'm currently narrating Donna Hill's Confessions in B flat. So all of a sudden, this turned into this little thing that I wanted to ended up turning into a whole nother business. So there you go.
Are you enjoying it though?
Oh man, I'm having a lot of fun. You know what? It's a lot like writing, except instead of sitting here writing the things that are in my head, I'm actually vocalizing them. And let me tell you, when you start vocalizing stuff, because you really like talking to yourself, it can get a little strange. And especially when you start probably TMI, but when you start reading a love scene and you're like, oh, okay, let me get my drink, before I start reading this love scene.
Can you do some of the voices, maybe 1 or 2 voices that you narrate?
Oh, sure. I have. You know what? I could also read a little bit of Donna Hill's book, because that's what I'm in the studio doing now. So
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
I'm narrating her book. But for those, I didn't bring Lenny Gray into the booth. Um,
Oh,
yeah, I was, but I do have a couple of others in here. But and then because I was, literally, doing voiceover here.
would it
Um,
take a second for you to grab it? Because I
uh,
particularly love Lenny Gray. We can do
okay.
the yeah,
Well, here, hang on a second. Let me
because
see.
that was impressive to the people at the Cavalcade last year when you read, when you talked about it at the Grand Lux in Chicago.
Yeah, yeah, and at that time I didn't even have the podcast yet.
Yeah.
It was strictly, I was doing I don't know if I did have the podcast. I'm not sure.
You did because you told us about the success of it at that point in time. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah, and
they gave a free download of it there. So yeah.
it just continues. It just continues to grow. So I'm just like, just really excited about, that work and, what that's doing. And again, the fact that it has so many followers all over the place. So here, hang on a second. I'm trying to find Lenny Gray. Yeah, give me a second. Give me a
No
second, and
problem.
I'll.
We'll fill it in with something else while you do it because I want to hear Lenny Gray. I definitely want to hear Lenny Gray. So Earl,
Okay.
I met Earl way back in the day. We were doing we both started off as self-published, and we did signings at when there was Borders and Walden Books and Crown Books and all of those other places that no longer exist except for there's a Borders in Dubai. Was shocked when I saw that. It was amazing. So when we go to Dubai in 2020, we're definitely gonna take a trip because that almost feels like museum worthy. One a time there was Borders once a time. So there was that, but his energy has always been. He's been able to transition from writing from adult erotica and to children's books, and also doing speaking and worldwide. He's been amazing, and also Bunny and Royce, they always make sure to advocate for him to be part of the Cavalcade in whatever way that he can or he can fit in. Like, what about Earl? We need some more testosterone in the Cavalcade. What about Earl? So it's always Brian Smith and Earl, and Brian Smith was on Friday, and he talked about his paper bag, the brown paper bag test, that the infamous brown paper bag test. That's what his book was about, and what his experiences that he wrote into that book of what he had in real life with that particular how can I say a device, but Earl, particularly some of the drama that he's written for several publishing houses, and he's co-authored a few books. And he found, I think, the most challenging thing was writing with one author who's he's a plotter and a pantser, and you've got somebody just say, "Oh, I'm just gonna write whatever." So having two different types of dynamics in writing styles when you're co-authoring, he's like, "Oh, never do that again." But it was interesting to see his progression of that. But he still made it happen. But writing with somebody who's diametrically opposed to the way that you plan out a book, plot. We've got to know where it's going in order to get to where we're going. It's almost like saying, "Oh, we're gonna go to Canada. Just get in the car, we're gonna drive, and then we hit the expressway, we hit here, 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 here," instead of making sure we have a direct route. So I loved when it was like one day, I think he was talking about it, was like it was frustrating, but as a professional, he managed to do wonderful things with it and wonderful things with his career. And it's taken a trajectory that has been amazing to watch and amazing to experience on all levels. When he put out Keisha's Drama, and he put out some of the young adult, and I thought it was timely that we had something for our young Black people to read with them on the cover, and it was amazing. So it looks like he's back with us. You got us?
You know what? This is a damn shame. This is a damn shame. I'm sitting there looking for the book, and I said, I don't have it with me right here. I don't have it with me right here. And I thought that's a doggone shame. That's a doggone shame. But
But I thought it was on a podcast. Are you able to pull it up on even just?
Yeah, I can pull up the podcast. Oh, that's no problem. But
Well,
I'm sitting
I'm
there
just saying, are you able to read it from there, or are we able to listen to it from there? Somebody said they love hearing your voice.
Yes.
So, but
I got the podcast.
particularly
Hold
would
on.
like for you to read your work.
Yeah. Hang on a second. I can pull up the podcast. Hang on a second.
Okay. So, Bunny.
Yes.
So who are the people that you have out besides Earl have sponsored for the Cavalcade?
That's a trick question. Oh,
what?
That's a trick question. I'm hungry, so I can't think like that offhand. Okay.
You say I'm hungry. My brain isn't full.
I'm just glad my stomach. You can't hear it growling. I'm just glad.
Do you all do your 5 mile walk on the weekends too?
Yes, we did, but I didn't do it today because I wanted to be on time.
Oh, thank you.
That's okay. Yes.
We would have scheduled you a little. Well, when he finally got in, this was the only slot that was left.
Yeah.
Those slots for the Cavalcade went.
I can have one day not walking.
Yeah, but you've been doing good. That is awesome. You know, Black women get together early in the morning and do 5 miles. It was less miles at first, and you guys have worked up to 5.
Yeah, oh, but they was doing it before I joined them, and I was just trying to keep
always
up.
driving to dance lessons. So we signed up for Know Your Drive. We save money and get closer to her dancing dreams. The daring young man on the flying.
Hang on a second, there's a commercial going.
Or maybe her singing dream. And save up to 20%. American Family Insurance. Insure carefully, dream fearlessly.
Those are
American Family Insurance is
Terms apply. Visit amfam.com/know your drive for details. American Family Mutual Insurance Company, SI, and its operating company, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin.
Amazing job, Bunny. I'm proud of you. So
Katie Books Productions presents Lenny Gray, an audio drama, written, produced, and narrated by Earl Sewell.
So it runs like a show. This is the beginning entry.
Turn it up a little bit.
Can you hear it?
Lenny Gray was at home with her children, the triplets, Leuna, Martha, and Christine, who were all 9 years old. Lenny Gray II, who was 8, and Jesse, who was 6, and Earl, who was 5. Lenny Gray sat angrily braiding Christine's hair while Leuna, Martha, and Lenny Gray II waited their turn. Jesse and Earl were nearby shooting marbles and eating red clay dirt because there was no food. Over the past few years, Curly's drinking reduced him to the point where he couldn't function because he enjoyed staying out all night at the juke joint. He'd gotten old, and the field work had taken its toll on his body, and drinking had pickled his brain. As Lenny Gray continued her braiding, she thought about when everything began to spiral out of control. It started when Willie returned home from the war. She thought about how he had told her and Curly that he would rather go back to the war and pick up dead bodies than to remain in Mississippi. He told them about the job in the apartment he had and how he was going to move on, meet a woman, and live a better life. That wounded Curly deeply, because in his mind, he'd done all he could to keep them safe from harm, and his children were supposed to appreciate the life that he had built for them. They weren't supposed to leave. Their hair was buried in a box under the house. He had set things up so that they could follow in his footsteps, live small, and free from trouble. "I seen too much," Willie said. "I've been all across this planet, and one thing that I didn't learn for myself is that this world got more things to offer than Mississippi." When Willie said what he needed to tell them, Curly blew up at him and tried to force him to stay in Mississippi through emotional manipulation. His weapons were guilt and responsibility to the family. He told Willie repeatedly that he could protect him from the Klan and that there was nothing to worry about as long as he knew his place. Daddy, Willie said, I've been to war in Europe and Japan. I done lived through people shooting at me, bombs being dropped around me, and hand grenades thrown at me. I would rather go back to living like that than to stay here in Mississippi living on my knees. I don't care about the Klan. They don't rule the world. Willie remained at home for a week and then left. Roosevelt, who hated working in the fields, with a wheel mule that was crippled and a lead mule that had a blind eye, decided to take his chances with his brother in Chicago and left in 1948.
All right. That good enough?
Yes.
Yes, I like that. I like that. And where can everybody go in and hear that? Is there a link you can drop in that they can go and get?
I'll drop in a link in the chat. I'll stay on afterwards and put it in there because I'm zooming in through my phone, so I don't want to do all the moving, but I'll drop it in. But basically, you can go to any app on your phone that's a podcast. If you have Apple, it's iPodcast, Android, Google Play, any place where you listen to a podcast. Like if you listen to the Michelle Obama podcast on Spotify, if you go there and type in Lenny Gray, I'll come up. You can't miss it. You can't miss it. It's a picture of a Black woman, and she has like a little artistic work on her face. But anyway, so yeah, that's what I did with the book. I turned the book into a show. And so all of the sound design and all of that around it, I put all of that in it. I went ahead and produced that. And so it just really, adding these sound elements really pulls the reader into the story. And also, since this is a period piece, it takes place in 1918 and goes forward in time. There was a lot of a different type of like ragtime jingles that I put in there, royalty-free music that I put in there, just to add that little element of drama into the story. Because ultimately, we often hear, as writers, we hear the sounds in our heads. We hear the music that's playing in our heads. And to actually give life to it is, amazing. And then to be able to give life to it ourselves is even better. It's just a lot of fun to do. It's a lot of fun to produce. And then to also get the chance to produce work for other writers is even, it's just, wow. It feels really good to reinvent myself in this way.
Awesome.
You also,
and the music was good too. Oh my goodness. That did sound like some what you call it? Backyard music.
Yeah, well, I tried to help it as writers, you have to do setting, or time, so it helps with the setting of what I want to do. And again, it helps, it adds to the words to push the emotional elements of the story and bring it to life, so that although you're listening to it audibly, in your mind, you're having a different experience. You feel like you're right there with them. So if I say they're in the backyard, well, I'll put in sounds of crickets chirping or, night sounds on a farm. I'll put that sound element in there so that when you say, okay, you're on the back porch of a farm, you hear that in the background as these people are talking, and like you feel like you're right there.
Okay.
So you also have a different type of podcast where you interview other authors, correct?
Yeah, so that's a Reader's Paradise. So I have another podcast, and you can also find it on Spotify, wherever you go. And so I interview other authors about their work. So if you're an author and you want to get on the podcast, I need some content, to find me. So I'll drop a link in there where you can find me if you want to be on the show. And that show is also listened to internationally.
Okay, I can send you the list. You've met some of the people I would like to be on the show as tribe members, of course. Like, I don't know if you were on when Stephanie did. I think you would do some damage to Season of the Blood. I'm just saying, you heard a little bit about in her voice. You reminded me, I swear, when you started speaking, it felt like I was back in school listening to those. Remember we had those movie days where the projector came out and there was that narrated voice. I swear it took me back to those days. It had that voice like, Walk through the grass. I mean, it was just that crisp, that clear, that professional. Not that we expect anything else, but it's awesome to hear a Black man to be able to narrate and just make a business out of it and just go international like you have. That is amazing. That's an amazing thing. So yeah, I'll send you a list of tribe members who are interested with their emails, and you can either just let me know the process and I'll drop it into the group, and they'll already have together what you need from them before they even approach you.
Yeah, great, and that is wonderful. And also for those who come onto the show, what I do with the show is I ask that either you read a section of your work and allow me to produce a section of it, because there's a breakdown when I let the author read it, or if they want me to read it, I'll go ahead and produce a little clip for them that has a little Black background music or whatever for that dramatic element, so that it goes on the podcast. And then if the author wants that particular section to do their own marketing, they can get it that way. They'll have a produced audio section of their work, a small section, 60 minutes to 1 to 2 minutes, where they can go and do whatever they want to with it. So it's a lot of fun to do.
How do you handle recording books? Like there's one tribe member who shall remain nameless, Stephanie and Freeman, who can write like, oh my God, when she came to us, she was writing like 100,000 words for a book. And, we've gotten it down to being able to get from the action to the action. So they're now like anywhere from 55 to 65. But how do you handle doing books that have long stretches of text?
Well, you have to, like, as in production time, or you're talking production time, right?
Production and reading, because of course, I mean, is it okay, this is how much the book is, and I'm going to read this much per day to get it done in this amount of time. How do you break that up?
Okay, so what I have to do is, when I get a manuscript, the first thing I have to do is I have to read the entire book, because I have to know how the book ends, so that through the vocalization process, I know how to guide the reader. Okay, I know how to do that. Then once I've read the book, then I got to do something called marking up the manuscript. And here, I'll just share my screen here with you a little bit. I don't know if you can see that.
Angle it a little differently. Just angle it down.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. So that's me marking up a manuscript. That's me marking up Donna's book. And so what all of that does is I have to come up with the character voices. And so as I read, when I put a different color on it, I know where I have to switch a transition. So okay. For example, if I would say, I have my narrator's voice, I can say, he chuckled, you were both in the choir. And so I can have the narrator's voice, and then I see a color, then I switch voices. So I have to do that for the whole manuscript. Then as I read it, I just fall in and out of the character voices, but they're all marked. Each character has a color. And I record the character voices so that I can remember which voice I gave to them. Then with the time, it's just a matter, if it's 100,000 words, I'm going to need a little more time, because that's a fairly long project. The longest audiobook I narrated was for, I think, Anthony Ellis McGee, and that was about 14 hours of audio. And that was finished, produced audio. So that's a road trip. So that's like, say, okay, I'm going to drive to New York this weekend, or I'm going to drive to Atlanta. You can pop in that audiobook, and you can have a story all the way down there, and you'll be good.
Awesome. Bunny, I'm going to let you have the parting words. We got 2 minutes to wrap him up, and we've got our next guest rolling in.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really enjoyed it. And your last words.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. I love you guys for sponsoring me. Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it. I know I get busy all the time, but I appreciate you, wagging my coattail a little bit to say, hey, don't.
Thank you.
Oh, my bad. Take away. Hold on. Uh-oh.
Unmute. Okay, am I here?
Yeah, there you go. I'm sorry.
Okay, you didn't mean to mute me. I was like, damn, I got cut.
Sorry, the engineer just called in.
Okay, so if you are an author and you are interested in having your book produced into audio, and you want to reach out to me, you can reach me at earlsewellvoice.com. That's EARL SEWELL VOICE.com, EarlSewellVoice.com, and then you can hear some of my samples. And you can also email me through that website, both for audiobook and if you want to be on the show. And I'll also put that information down in the chat. Thank you,
Awesome.
Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, for doing this. I appreciate you. I have been here with you from day one, and I've watched this thing grow, and it's amazing. I can't believe how many years have come to pass. It has been an amazing journey.
Yes,
Thank you
at
so
the very first Cavalcade. You were
yes,
at
I was driving authors around the very first Cavalcade.
Yes. Remember we had like 40 locations or whatever, and we're going. Oh yeah, that was amazing. So I'm grateful for you hanging out, and wonderful, and congratulations on everything in your career. Look for an email from me regarding the tribe members doing this podcast thing, the interviews, or even I've got to get with you for audio, because that was the next step for the tribe members, is to do audio.
Oh man, audiobooks is the way to go, because people are looking for entertainment. You can listen to an audiobook while you clean, while you walk, while you're doing your 5 miles. You can listen to an audiobook. It'll make those 5 miles go by really quickly.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you so very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're quite welcome. Quite welcome. Thank you, Bunny. And hopefully you can get a little bit of walking in, so because your legs don't know how to act when you're not doing it. You're doing it every day. So thank you so much for coming in. And I'm sorry that you had to miss your 5-mile walk, because I love seeing your journey on Facebook. So
thank you.
Thanks again. Okay. Bye-bye now.